It was the hottest afternoon of the week. The sun was beating down on the sidewalk so hard that even the air felt heavy. People hurried past with cold drinks in their hands, trying to stay in the shade. But right in front of the small diner where he worked, a young waiter named Ethan suddenly stopped what he was doing. Outside, he noticed an elderly woman, her clothes worn, her gray hair tied back in a messy bun, slowly pushing a mop across the scorching pavement. Her hands were shaking, and her shirt was soaked with sweat. Every few seconds, she had to pause just to catch her breath. Ethan watched her for a moment. She looked exhausted, far more exhausted than someone her age should ever be. Something inside him tightened. He couldn't just stand there and pretend he didn't see it. So he rushed back inside the diner, filled a cup with cold lemonade, added extra ice, and stepped out the door again. He approached her gently, bending down a little so she could see him clearly. With a kind smile, he held out the cup and said, "You must be thirsty, ma'am." For a second, the old woman looked surprised, as if she wasn't used to anyone paying attention to her. She hesitated before slowly reaching out to take the drink. Her voice trembled as she whispered a soft, "Thank you. I didn't expect anyone to notice." Ethan didn't know it yet, but this simple act of kindness would be the moment that changed everything for her. And for him. The old woman held the cup of lemonade with both hands, almost as if she was afraid she might drop it. Ethan stayed beside her for a moment, watching her take small, careful sips. The relief on her face was obvious, her shoulders relaxed. And for the first time, she managed a faint smile. "Ma'am, it's really hot today," Ethan said softly. "Why don't you step inside for a bit? We've got air conditioning. You can cool down before finishing your work." But the woman shook her head immediately, tightening her grip on the mop handle. "Oh no, dear, I can't," she murmured. "They only gave me until 3 o'clock to finish this section. If I stop now, I won't make it." Ethan frowned. Her voice wasn't complaining, just tired in a way that felt deeper than the heat of the afternoon. He glanced back toward the diner. Customers were chatting, eating, enjoying themselves. Inside was cool and comfortable. Outside, she was alone in the sun. "You shouldn't be working out here like this," he said. "It's not safe." She gave a small laugh. The kind of laugh people use when they're trying to pretend things are fine. "Life doesn't really give me much choice anymore," she replied. That single sentence stuck with him. No choice anymore. It wasn't something people said unless things were truly difficult. Ethan felt a tug of worry. "At least let me get you some shade," he offered, just for a moment. But again, she refused. "Thank you, sweet boy, but I've been doing this job for years. I'll be fine." Years? Ethan blinked. She looked old enough to be someone's great-grandmother. Why was she still out here scrubbing sidewalks in the blazing sun? He didn't want to push her, so he stepped back, but his mind wouldn't stop spinning. Something about her situation didn't add up. No family around, no support, working beyond her limits, and no one else seemed to notice or care. As he returned inside the diner, he found himself glancing back at her through the window. She had already gone back to scrubbing the pavement, moving slowly, each motion heavier than the last. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was a story behind her exhaustion, a story he needed to understand. And without knowing it, he had just taken the first step toward uncovering a truth that would change both of their lives. Later that afternoon, when the lunch rush finally slowed, Ethan stepped outside to take out the trash. As he walked toward the back alley behind the diner, he spotted the old woman again. She was slowly dragging her cleaning cart toward a shaded corner, trying to catch a breath where no one could see her. Ethan paused. From far away, she looked even smaller than before, almost fragile. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable, but something in his gut told him to check on her. As he got closer, he heard it. A harsh, dry cough, one that didn't sound like a simple reaction to the heat. The woman tried to muffle it with her sleeve, but the cough kept coming, shaking her thin frame. She reached for the wall to steady herself. "Ma'am?" Ethan said gently. "Are you all right?" Startled, she straightened up quickly, forcing a smile that wasn't really there. "Oh, it's nothing," she insisted. "Just a bit of dust. I'm fine." But Ethan wasn't convinced. She looked pale, her hands trembling slightly as she held onto the mop handle. "You don't look fine," he said, At least sit down for a second. The woman stepped back defensively. I don't need anyone worrying about me, she said. People walk past every day. And I manage just fine. Don't trouble yourself. Her words weren't rude, just tired. Tired of being a burden. Tired of being noticed only when someone felt sorry for her. Ethan kept his distance, speaking softly so she wouldn't feel pressured. I'm not trying to interfere, he said. I just want to help if something's wrong. For the first time, she looked directly into his eyes. There was a mix of gratitude and fear there. Fear of letting someone see how difficult her life had really become. I've handled things alone for a long time, she whispered. People have their own problems. I don't want to add to them. Ethan didn't argue, but inside, he felt heavier than before. If she was willing to push herself to the point of collapsing, alone, then something far deeper was going on. As she slowly walked away to continue her work, Ethan stood in the alley watching her, feeling both frustrated and determined. He didn't know how yet. But he knew one thing for sure. He had to find out what was really happening to her. When Ethan's shift finally ended that evening, he was still thinking about the old woman. The image of her coughing in the alley wouldn't leave his mind. As he headed into the break room to grab his backpack, he overheard two coworkers chatting near the lockers. Did you see Margaret out there again today? One of them said. Ethan paused mid-step. Margaret. So that was her name. Yeah, the other replied. She's been doing that job forever. I think almost 20 years now. Ethan frowned. 20 years? Working outdoors, cleaning streets, in that kind of heat? It didn't make sense. The first coworker lowered his voice. I don't think she has anyone at home. No husband, no kids. At least, no one's ever come looking for her. That's sad, the second one muttered. But she's tough. She never asks for help. Ethan stepped closer. Hey, sorry, but does anyone know more about her? I mean, why she's still working so hard at her age? Both coworkers looked at him, a little surprised by his interest. The older one shrugged. No idea. She keeps to herself, shows up early, leaves late, doesn't talk much unless it's about her work. People tried offering her money a few times. The younger added, but she always refused, said she doesn't take handouts. Ethan absorbed every word. The more he learned, the more questions he had. Why was someone her age still forced to work this way? What happened to her family? And why did she look so worn down? As if life had quietly chipped away at her for years? He sat down on the bench, tying his shoes slowly as the conversation echoed in his mind. This wasn't just a random encounter anymore. Something about Margaret's situation felt wrong, like a puzzle missing its most important pieces. Before leaving, he glanced out the side window of the diner. Margaret was still there, packing up her cleaning supplies at the end of a long day. Her movements were careful, almost stiff, as if every muscle protested after hours of work. Ethan felt a pull inside him, a mix of concern and responsibility he couldn't explain. He didn't know her story yet. But he knew one thing. He couldn't just watch her struggle from a distance anymore. The next afternoon, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Margaret. All day, he found himself glancing toward the sidewalk where she usually worked. But when his shift ended and she was nowhere in sight, he felt a sudden worry rise in his chest. On his way home, he took the long route, a quiet street leading to a small park at the end of the block. The park wasn't anything special. A few old benches, a fountain that rarely worked, and a handful of trees offering shade from the sun. As he walked past, something caught his attention. There, on one of the worn wooden benches, sat Margaret. She had a small lunchbox open on her lap. Inside was a simple meal, rice, a few slices of bread, and what looked like leftover vegetables. She ate slowly, taking small bites, almost as if she was trying to make the meal last longer. Her posture looked tired, her shoulders slumped in a way that made her seem even older than she was. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then walked over quietly. "Hi, Margaret," he said gently. She looked up, surprised. "Oh, it's you, dear," the kind young man from the diner. Ethan smiled and sat down on the opposite end of the bench, giving her space. "I was just passing by," he said. "Thought I'd say hello. How was your day?" She chuckled softly, though the weariness in her eyes didn't fade. "A long one, like always." but I'm used to it. He glanced at the small lunchbox. Do you always eat here? Most days, she replied. It's quiet, and the shade helps. There was no complaint in her voice, just acceptance. Acceptance of a routine that didn't sound healthy or fair. Ethan cleared his throat. If you ever need anything, water, a place to cool down, or just someone to talk to, you can come by the diner. I'm usually around. Margaret smiled faintly, touched but hesitant. You're very kind, dear, but I don't want to trouble anyone. People have their own lives. That doesn't mean you should face everything alone, Ethan said softly. For a moment, Margaret didn't respond. She simply stared at her lunchbox, her expression thoughtful, maybe even conflicted. Then she whispered, almost too quietly to hear. Sometimes loneliness becomes a habit. Ethan felt a sudden ache in his chest. The more he learned about her, the more he realized how much she had been carrying, quietly, invisibly, for years. And he knew this was only the beginning. A few days later, after finishing his shift, Ethan walked the same route toward the small park. He hoped to see Margaret again, just to make sure she was all right. As he got closer, he noticed her standing up from the bench slowly, holding her lunchbox and a small cloth bag. Her steps looked unsteady. Margaret, he called out gently. She turned and smiled, though her face looked pale. Oh, hello, dear. Heading home? Yes, Ethan replied. Are you going home too? Do you live nearby? She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Just a short walk from here. Nothing fancy. Ethan didn't want to intrude, but he could tell she was struggling a little. Would you mind if I walked with you? It's getting late. Margaret looked surprised, then softened. If you'd like. They walked slowly down a narrow street lined with old houses. After a few minutes, she stopped in front of a small, worn-down home with chipped paint and a sagging porch. The curtains were thin, faded by the sun. The front steps creaked when she placed her foot on them. This is me, she said quietly, almost apologetically. It's not much. Ethan shook his head. It doesn't have to be much. It's home. She gave a shy smile and pushed the door open. Inside, the house was tidy but clearly old, furniture patched together. A small table with one chair, and a heater that looked older than Ethan. A few framed photos sat on a shelf, but most were turned face down. Ethan noticed. Are those your family? Margaret froze for a second. They were. She quickly changed the subject. Would you like some tea? I don't have much, but I can make a little. You don't need to do that, Ethan said gently. I just wanted to see you home safely. She sat down slowly, rubbing her hands as if trying to hide the slight tremble. People don't usually visit, she murmured. It's been a long time since I've had company. Ethan looked around again, at the dim lights, the cracked walls, the quiet that felt too heavy for someone her age. In that moment, he understood something he hadn't fully grasped before. Margaret wasn't just working hard because she wanted to. She was working hard because she had no one left to lean on. And Ethan knew he couldn't walk away from that. A week later, Ethan stopped by the park again after his shift. He had begun to worry whenever he didn't see Margaret working. And today was one of those days. The sidewalk in front of the diner looked untouched. Her cleaning cart was nowhere in sight. He tried to calm himself, but something about the silence felt wrong. As he walked toward the small street leading to her home, he spotted her, leaning against the wall near the corner store. Her face pale, her breath uneven. Before he could call her name, her knees buckled. Margaret. Ethan rushed forward just in time to catch her before she hit the ground. Her eyes fluttered open for a second. I'm fine, she whispered weakly. But she wasn't fine. Her pulse felt faint, and her skin was burning hot from fever. Without hesitation, Ethan lifted her gently and flagged down a passing cab. To the town clinic. Please, quick. At the clinic, nurses helped him get her onto a stretcher. Ethan paced the hallway, heart pounding, until a doctor finally stepped out, holding a clipboard. You brought her in just in time, the doctor said. She's severely dehydrated, and her blood pressure is dangerously low. Has she been overexerting herself? Ethan nodded quietly. She works long hours outside. She never rests. The doctor sighed. At her age, that kind of strain can be extremely risky. Does she have any family we should contact? Ethan swallowed. I don't think she does. The doctor looked concerned. She shouldn't be living alone in her condition. She's been neglecting her health for a long time. This isn't the first warning sign. A few minutes later, Ethan was allowed into the small examination room. Margaret lay on the bed, an IV attached to her arm. She looked embarrassed more than sick. I told them I don't need all this fuss. She muttered softly. I just got a little dizzy. Ethan shook his head. Margaret, you collapsed. You can't keep pushing yourself like this. She avoided his eyes. I don't have anyone else. Dear, if I can't work, I can't survive. That's just how life is. Those words hit Ethan harder than he expected. The quiet resignation, the years of struggle behind them. It was clearer than ever that this wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was loneliness. It was survival. And it was slowly breaking her. Ethan sat beside her, voice gentle but firm. You're not alone anymore, Margaret. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. For the first time, she let herself believe him. The next morning, after making sure Margaret was resting at the clinic, Ethan headed straight to the district maintenance office, the place responsible for assigning jobs like hers. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he needed answers. The more he learned about her, the more uneasy he felt. Inside, a man in a polo shirt sat behind a cluttered desk, scrolling casually through his phone. Ethan approached. Hi, Ethan began carefully. I'm here about Margaret, the woman who cleans the sidewalks on 5th Street. The man barely looked up. Oh yeah, the old lady. What about her? Ethan's jaw tightened at the dismissive tone. She collapsed yesterday. She's in the clinic right now. I wanted to understand why she's still being assigned such heavy work. The man shrugged. She kept showing up. As long as she works. We assign the hours. But she's elderly. Ethan pressed. And sick. Doesn't she get any kind of support? Hasn't she earned leave or benefits after all these years? The man finally set his phone down. Look, kid, she's a contract worker. No benefits. No retirement plan. If she doesn't work, she doesn't get paid. That's how it's always been. Ethan felt anger rising in his chest. And what about her pay? She told me she hadn't received her last 2 checks. That got the man's attention, though not in the way Ethan hoped. He scoffed. She probably misplaced them. Old people forget things. No, Ethan said sharply. I checked with the clerk at the diner. They said she mentioned missing pay before. So which is it? Were the checks never issued? Or did someone here forget to process them? The man leaned back, annoyed. Look, she's not our responsibility beyond her hours. If she has a complaint, she can file a form. She didn't even know that was an option. Ethan shot back. And you knew she didn't. That's why no one bothered helping her. A long silence fell. For the first time, the man shifted uncomfortably. Ethan stepped closer, voice steady but firm. She's been working for you for years. The least you can do is treat her with dignity. I want her missing payments found and processed immediately. The man muttered something under his breath but turned to his computer. Fine, I'll check the records. As he typed, Ethan realized something important. Margaret hadn't just been struggling because of age or illness. She had been quietly exploited, and no one cared enough to notice. No one, until now. Leaving the maintenance office, Ethan felt a tight knot in his chest. Learning that Margaret had been underpaid and ignored made his anger burn even deeper. But anger alone wouldn't help her. She needed support, real support, and she needed it now. When he arrived back at the diner for his evening shift, his coworkers immediately noticed something was off. Hey, you okay? One of them asked. Ethan nodded, though his expression was still tense. I just came from the maintenance office. They admitted Margaret hasn't been paid in weeks. And apparently, she has no benefits, no support, nothing. The room fell silent. Another coworker shook his head. That's awful. She's worked harder than most people I know. Ethan took a deep breath. I want to help her, but I can't do it alone. He wasn't sure what to expect. But slowly, one by one, his coworkers stepped closer. I'm in, someone said. Me too. Tell us what she needs. Their willingness surprised him. He had always thought people noticed Margaret but never cared enough to act. Maybe all they ever needed was someone to take the first step. Together, they placed a small donation jar near the counter. No announcement, no big sign, just quiet generosity. By the end of the night, customers who overheard snippets of conversation had also begun dropping in bills. Some asked about Margaret, some simply nodded and gave what they could. But Ethan didn't stop there. After closing, he signed up for extra shifts, late-night cleanups, early morning prep work, anything to save more money for her. He walked home long after midnight, exhausted but determined. It wasn't just about charity. It wasn't pity. It was the simple, stubborn belief that no one who had worked as hard as Margaret deserved to face life completely alone. The next morning, he visited her at the clinic again. She looked a little stronger, but the shadows beneath her eyes remained. "You shouldn't keep coming here," she told him softly. "You've done more than enough." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not done, Margaret, not even close." She didn't understand what he meant yet. But soon, she would. Because Ethan wasn't just trying to help her through a bad week. He was trying to change the course of her life. A few days later, Margaret was finally strong enough to leave the clinic. Ethan arrived early that morning to walk her home, but she surprised him with a quiet request. "Before we go, could you take me somewhere?" Her voice was soft, almost uncertain. "Of course," Ethan replied, "anywhere you want." She gave him an address, an old neighborhood on the other side of town. The houses there were older, the streets narrower, the trees taller. As they walked, Margaret looked around with a faraway expression, as if searching for something she had lost long ago. "This is where I lived when I was younger," she said, "before life changed." They stopped in front of a faded, abandoned house. The porch was broken, the windows dusty, but Margaret stared at it with trembling eyes. "Someone important once lived here," she whispered. Ethan looked closer. Something about the place felt oddly familiar. "Who was it?" She swallowed hard. "A young man, kind, hard-working. I helped him when he first came to town with nothing. I gave him meals, work, and a place to stay until he got on his feet." Ethan felt his heart skip. "Do you remember his name?" She nodded slowly. Daniel Carter." The world stopped for a moment. Daniel Carter was Ethan's father. Ethan stepped back, breath catching in his throat. "Margaret, my dad used to talk about a woman who helped him survive when he was broke and alone. The woman he said he regretted never being able to thank properly." Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. "Your father, he made it? He had a good life?" "He did," Ethan said, voice thick. "Because of you." Margaret covered her mouth, overwhelmed. All these years, she had believed her kindness had disappeared into the past, forgotten. But it had come full circle. Ethan took her hand gently. "You helped my family when we had nothing. Now it's my turn to take care of you." For the first time, Margaret didn't argue. She didn't refuse help. She simply let the truth warm her tired heart. Ethan continued, "Your missing pay is being processed. And the diner staff, we're helping cover your bills. You're not alone anymore." Margaret cried quietly, not from sadness but from relief. As they walked away from the old house, side by side, Ethan realized something. This wasn't just a story about kindness. It was the beginning of a new life, for both of them. A life built on gratitude, connection, and a love that had waited decades to be recognized. And for the first time in many years, Margaret didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. She felt valued. She felt home.